legal battle over same-sex marriage is again intensifying. Let's get right to our brain trust on that. Zerlina Maxwell is a political analyst and contributor at The Griot. Lynn Sweet is the Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Peter Suderman is the senior editor at Reason magazine. Zerlina, opponents are set to take the fight to federal court. The New York Times is reporting scholars testifying in defense of Michigan's constitutional ban on same-sex marriage aim to sow doubt about the wisdom of change. They brandish a few sharply disputed recent studies to suggest that children of same-sex couples do not fare as well as those who are raised by married heterosexuals. The case will be heard in Detroit on Tuesday. So what is the real next step here?
Well, I think the real next step is they need to stop making this argument in court, because this argument mirrors many of the arguments that we heard, people who are against interracial marriage, right? So Loving v. Virginia is the famous Supreme Court case that made very similar arguments, right? It damages the children. And I just have to say that as an African American, discrimination hurts the children much more than a same-sex relationship. A loving family hurts children. That helps children.
But Peter, proponents of same-sex marriage are also taking to the courts. NBC's Pete Williams writes this: cases are now pending in all but 8 of 33 states that forbid gay couples to marry. Most have been filed since the U.S. Supreme Court ruled last June that the federal government cannot refuse to recognize same-sex marriage in the states where it is legal. Is this issue destined to be fought state by state by state?
I think it's certainly that is the direction it's going right now, and in the short term, that's what we're going to see. It's likely to end up at the Supreme Court eventually, but right now we're seeing big victories in the states. You see in Utah, in Virginia, in Oklahoma, you see big rulings in favor of same-sex marriage. In places like Kentucky and Ohio, you see more narrow rulings, and you also see a big public shift in opinions over the last decade or so. You've actually seen a major reversal in public opinion, and that is in part what is allowing these courts to make these opinions in favor of same-sex marriage.
Lynn, right now same-sex marriage is legal in 17 states and the District of Columbia. Do you think this issue is likely to be back in the Supreme Court before long, given all that we've just been talking about?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know if there are novel issues in some of these lawsuits which would influence whether the Supreme Court took it or not. I think just the idea, though, that there are many cases pending shows just how contentious this is judicially. Maybe it will take a few years for us to determine what is settled law. But I think a point to be made and I agree that the court is a very, I think, dicey strategy for people who are opposed to same-sex marriage. If you want to just say you're against it, if that's your opinion, that's one thing. To try and rely on some kind of sociological studies to make a point where they could come out against you, it seems a very dicey proposition. Anyway, the historic trend right now is towards everyone seems to be more on board with gay marriage, and it seems now it's just a matter of time.
Zerlina, the group Freedom to Marry is taking a different approach. It is launching a $1 million PR campaign across the South. The Washington Post is reporting this. The campaign will push to grow public support, as we've been talking about, for same-sex marriage. About 24 lawsuits challenging bans on gay marriage are pending before the state and federal courts in southern states. And Freedom to Marry hopes that building public support for same-sex marriage can influence those judges' decisions. But is that really enough to change hearts and minds out there?
I think so. And the reason why I think so is because we're seeing more and more that younger people and people of color, we're trending towards progress. We're trending towards equality and not stripping away people's rights. And so, for example, in Arizona, Jan Brewer has a decision to make this week whether or not she's going to sign a discriminatory law in that state. And there's a lot of pressure, even in the state of Arizona, for her to reject that law. And I think that even if we're seeing it in Arizona, that demonstrates that we're moving towards progress, because Arizona is a very conservative state.
Peter, one more question to you. As we've been sort of touching on, could this be a generational issue? I mean, certain issues are worked out as different generations come along.
It is absolutely a generational issue, and for the millennials, this issue is already settled. 81% of people under 30 say that same-sex marriage should be legal. But it's actually an issue that we're seeing shift amongst conservatives, amongst religious people. You've seen 25-point shifts amongst evangelicals, amongst conservatives, amongst groups that are the most opposed traditionally to legal same-sex marriage. And so it's something that's happening generationally, not just among amongst progressives, not just amongst the left, but amongst the right, amongst religious people as well.
All right, our Brain Trust, we will have to leave it there. Zerlina Maxwell from thegrio.com, Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times, and Peter Suderman from Reason Magazine. Thanks to all of you.